Why was everyone so sure she'd miss? The question hung in the heat like dust, unspoken but heavy. The range was quiet except for the hum of flies and the faint rattle of spent brass under boots. 12 men stood in a half circle, arms crossed, watching her. 30 meters away, Staff Sergeant Trace faced the target, a sheet of metal painted tan from days of failed attempts. 3 days, dozens of rounds, not one hit. Now it was her turn. She's just a farm girl who got lucky in basic. One of the Marines muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The others chuckled, low and mean, the kind of laughter that told you they'd already decided the ending. Didn't respond. Her hands were steady, her breathing slow. The rifle in her arms was new, untested, an M40A5 with a scope so clear it made the horizon shimmer. She adjusted the stock against her shoulder, felt the weight of it settle. Somewhere behind her, Captain's voice called out wind speed, distance, direction, numbers that meant less to her than the feel of the air brushing her cheek. She didn't need the math. She learned this long before the Corps. Back home in the wheat country of eastern Montana, where the wind never stopped and silence carried farther than sound. Her grandfather had taught her to read the world, to tell the difference between a gust that would fade and one that would stay. He used to say wind wasn't an obstacle. It was a language. If you paid attention, it would tell you where it was going. Now, on this ridge halfway across the world, that memory steadied her. The Marines behind her grew restless. One of them sighed loud enough to make a point. Another mumbled something about wasting ammunition, but didn't look back. She waited. 30 seconds, 40. The valley air shifted, slowing, flattening. She pressed the trigger. The shot cracked through the heat, sharp, surgical, final. The impact rang like a hammer, dead center. No one spoke. For a heartbeat, even the wind seemed to pause. Then someone whispered, "Holy hell." She lowered the rifle and exhaled, not in triumph, in release, the way a weight leaves you when you've carried it too long. That was the first time the firebase went quiet for her. It wouldn't be the last. 2 weeks earlier, had stepped off a supply helo into a world that looked like dust and bone. The firebase sat on a ridge overlooking the valley, a rough stretch of eastern Afghanistan, where the mountains swallowed sound and light. She'd been sent as an augment to a Marine Scout sniper platoon, men who'd been at it for months, running Overwatch missions, and chasing a ghost of a Taliban commander who always appeared just out of reach. That was the name, the kind you didn't say out loud after dark. He'd been spotted on a distant, coordinating mortar teams that had already killed 2 Marines and wounded 6. Every attempt to hit him had failed. The wind turned bullets sideways, shifted in seconds, made formulas useless. The platoon was running out of answers. That was when command sent her. Trace, 28 years old, 2 deployments, 43 confirmed engagements, all beyond 600 meters. A decade of proving herself in rooms where no one wanted her there. But here, none of that mattered. To them, she was an outsider, a test case from HQ, a woman with a clean record and a reputation that didn't belong in the dirt. They didn't see her hours on rooftops the time she'd held position for 31 hours without moving, waiting for one clear line of sight. They didn't see the blood she'd scrubbed off her hands after. All they saw was her face. The briefing tent smelled like gun oil and sweat. 15 Marines sat around a folding table while Captain stood at the front, a map pinned behind him, corners flapping in the heat. "It's been sighted again," he said. "Same 900 meters west. Every time we engage, the wind pushes the shot 3 to 5 meters off. We need a solution before command hands this to another unit." He opened the floor. Gunnery Sergeant, the senior sniper, broad and sunburned, suggested calling in air support. Another Marine recommended repositioning to a closer hide. Raised her hand. "The wind can be read," she said quietly, "if we stop relying on instruments and start watching the terrain." Turned, eyebrows lifting, watching the terrain. She nodded. Dust, temperature shifts, inversion layers. You can predict a change before it happens if you know what to look for. The room went still for a moment. Then someone snorted. Maybe we should just pray the bullets onto target while we're at it. A few laughs, even didn't shut it down. Didn't argue. She'd learned long ago that some people don't listen until they see it for themselves. After the briefing, she walked back to her tent and sat on her cot with her rifle across her knees. She field-stripped it without thinking, a ritual more than a task. The smell of gun oil reminded her of evenings in Montana, her grandfather sitting by the window, radio humming while he cleaned his Remington. She thought about the look it had given her, that quiet disbelief that followed her everywhere. It wasn't the first time. A staff sergeant had pulled her off a mission because he didn't think a woman should share a hide with 3 men for 72 hours. Another sniper had offered to carry her rifle for her, like she was a guest instead of a Marine. Every new base was the same, starting from zero, proving she belonged, every time. That night the wind howled through the valley, rattling the tent walls. She lay awake listening to it move, thinking how her grandfather used to say it had moods. Tonight it sounded restless, like something was waiting. The next morning it happened again. Movement on the western ridge. Was on observation duty when the radio crackled with reports. 2 Marines already had eyes on the target. She glassed the ridge, spotted him near a cluster of rocks, small figure, tan robe blending into the dust. He was standing there, bold as daylight, holding a radio. Target confirmed, someone said over comms. The first shot missed by 2 meters, the second by 5. Both rounds disappeared into the rocks behind him. Didn't even flinch. He looked down at the valley like he was daring them to try again. Then he vanished. Within minutes, called an emergency meeting. "We're out of time," he said. "Higher command's ready to pull us off and send in another platoon. Next time he shows himself, we either hit or we hand this over." Volunteered immediately. "I'll take the shot, different position, better weapon." Agreed, nobody argued. Waited until the meeting cleared out. Then she followed the captain outside, into the blinding sunlight. "Sir," she said quietly, "let me take the shot." He stopped, looked at her like he was deciding whether to scold her or listen. "You think you can hit him?" "I know I can." He studied her face for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I've been watching that valley since we got here. I know how it breathes, when it stalls, when it shifts. If I get one window, I'll take him." Nodded slowly. "If misses, you're up 1 shot, then we're done." She saluted. "Yes, sir." That night the valley slept under a blanket of pale dust. Sat outside her tent, cleaning her rifle again, the metal cold against her hands. From somewhere far off came the thump of distant mortars, echoes of someone else's war. She looked up at the sky, stars scattered across the black like the frozen sparks of old fires. She thought of home. The wheat fields in the dark, the sound of wind sliding over them, the way her grandfather would say, "Don't fight the air, feel it. It'll tell you when it's ready." She missed that voice, missed the simplicity of days when the only thing that mattered was the next fence post. But simplicity had a way of dying in places like this. Tomorrow it would just be the rifle, the valley, and the wind. And if she was right, silence. The valley was breathing again. By the heat shimmered off the rocks like a living thing. The looked empty through the scopes, but everyone felt it, that waiting tension that crawled under the skin before something happens. Then came the call. Movement Western Ridge. Had returned. Was already outside the command tent, her rifle slung across her back, boots powdered with dust. Was on the roof of the command building, surrounded by his instruments, anemometer, kestrel, range cards, a digital weather meter flickering in the light. She could hear him breathing over comms, steady, confident, sure of his data. Captain gave the order, "You're clear to engage." Didn't move. She stood 30 meters away, kneeling beside a low wall, her rifle resting on her pack, scope angled toward the same ridge. Fired. The crack rolled across the valley. The impact came a second later, a puff of dust, low and left. Missed. Over the radio's voice was tight. You're up. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The world narrowed to the crosshairs. The valley stretched out before her, a landscape of heat and silence. Through her scope, she found still standing by the rocks, talking into a radio, his posture relaxed. He didn't even know he was being watched. Distance, 847 meters. Wind, variable, shifting east by 1 degree every 30 seconds. Time now. She didn't trust numbers, she trusted rhythm. She watched the dust rise from the valley floor, swirling upward before flattening near the ridge. She tracked the pattern. Every 40 seconds the air stilled just for a breath before switching direction. Her heartbeat slowed. 30 seconds. 35. 40. The wind paused. She exhaled halfway, let the reticle settle just a hair above his chest, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle spoke once. The shot echoed, faint and sharp, bouncing off the ridges and fatting into nothing. Through the scope she saw the dust bloom behind him, then nothing. No movement, no sound. Confirm, said quietly. A spotter answered, voice trembling. Target down, no movement. Silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't need words. Someone laughed, a short, nervous sound. Another exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Then the radio crackled again, voices layering over each other, disbelief turning to awe. Climbed down from the roof and walked toward her. For once, he didn't have that smirk. His face looked older, humbled. How'd you know when to shoot? He asked. Looked at him. I didn't, I just felt it. He nodded slowly. 12 years doing this, never seen anyone read wind like that. She didn't smile. She just cleaned the bolt, wiped the dust from her scope, and whispered to herself, the wind always tells you when it's ready. That night the firebase didn't sleep. News traveled fast, faster than mortars, faster than doubt. Word was that Staff Sergeant Trace had done what no one else could, that she'd read the valley like a map and dropped the ghost who'd haunted them for weeks. Captain wrote up the report before midnight, citing exceptional proficiency and tactical innovation. He mentioned her calm under pressure, her instinct, her method. By dawn, her name was already being discussed 2 ranks above his. But didn't hear any of that. She was outside, sitting on a sandbag wall, staring into the pale morning fog. Her rifle lay across her lap, bolt open, barrel still warm from the day before. She wasn't thinking about medals or commendations. She was thinking about her grandfather. He'd told her once that shooting wasn't about pulling the trigger. It was about waiting, about knowing the difference between patience and hesitation. Most people never learned it. She wondered what he'd say now if he could see her. Probably something simple, something that made the impossible sound like chores. The wind moved across the valley again, soft and restless. She closed her eyes and listened. Later that week, Captain called her into the command tent. Sit down, Trace. He slid a paper across the table. Recommendation for the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, with a Combat V device. She stared at it. Sir, I was just doing my job. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but the way you did it changed how this unit operates, and the others have been running drills using your method. Their accuracy's already improving, 30% better on the range. Said nothing. You've earned it, continued, and more than that, you've earned their respect. Respect. She didn't say it out loud, but the word felt strange in her mouth. After years of fighting for it, now it just showed up quiet, like the wind she'd been listening to all her life. That evening she found and 4 other snipers at the range. They were watching the wind, not their instruments, but the dirt, the grass, the shimmer in the air. She walked up without a word, set her rifle down, and knelt beside them. "Watch that dust line," she said. "See how it curls near the rocks? That's an inversion. Temperature layers are flipping the direction at 30 meters up. You fire during that, you'll miss high every time." Nodded, "So wait for the flattening." "Exactly." They practiced for hours, calling shifts before the anemometer even registered them. By sunset, their shots were hitting closer, cleaner. For the first time since arriving, felt something new. Not victory, not pride, something quieter, belonging. The kind that doesn't need applause. That night, a few Marines invited her to the mess hall. Just cards, bad coffee, the kind of small talk that fills the silence between missions. She almost said no, old habits, but then she saw the look on their faces. It wasn't pity, it wasn't challenge, it was acceptance, simple and human. She sat down. The cards shuffled, laughter broke out over a bad hand, and for a while the war felt far away. Leaned back and said, "So farm girl, huh?" Smirked, "Wheat country, not much else to do out there but watch the wind." "Well," he said, "guess all that watching paid off." She nodded, eyes on her cup. "Eventually. But even peace has a short half-life out here." 2 nights later, the base was hit again, not by mortars this time, but by memory. A patrol convoy had been ambushed 3 clicks east. 2 men dead, 3 wounded. Didn't know their names well, but she recognized their laughter from the mess hall. The firebase went quiet again, the kind of quiet that only follows loss. She helped where she could, carrying stretchers, holding IV bags, doing the mechanical work that kept her hands busy while her mind tried not to look too closely. War had a way of reminding you that moments of calm weren't promises, they were pauses. And in those pauses, she always heard her grandfather's voice. "Stillness is where you find your truth, but truth isn't always kind." The following morning found her by the perimeter wall, staring out toward the ridge. "You all right, Staff Sergeant?" She nodded, just listening. "To what?" "The wind, it sounds different today." He didn't ask what she meant. Maybe he understood, maybe he didn't, but when he walked away, she kept listening. It wasn't just air moving through rock and dust. It was something else, the echo of everything this place took and everything it left behind. Somewhere in that sound was a reminder that belonging isn't granted by others. It's proven quietly, persistently, one breath, one act at a time. Later, when the sun dipped low and the valley turned gold, cleaned her rifle again. She'd done it 1,000 times, but tonight it felt different, reverent, almost ceremonial. Each motion was deliberate, careful, exact. Because in this world, precision was its own form of faith. And maybe that was the lesson she'd carried all along, that faith wasn't always about what you believed. Sometimes it was about what you refused to doubt. She looked across the valley, where the wind was tracing invisible lines through the dust. And she smiled just barely. The air was moving again, steady, certain. The kind that told her something was coming. She didn't know what yet. But she'd be ready. The air smelled like dust and rain that never came. 3 days had passed since the ambush. The firebase moved slower now, men quieter, footsteps heavier. Grief doesn't shout in places like this. It just lingers, like the taste of sand that won't wash away. Stood by the perimeter wall, her rifle slung low, scanning the valley through her scope. The where once stood looked harmless in the morning light. Peaceful, even. It was strange how quickly war erased the faces that haunted it. Behind her, a Humvee idled. Captain stepped out, his uniform creased, eyes tired. "Trace," he called. She lowered the scope. "Sir." "Pack your gear, we're moving out." Recon spotted something south of the valley, possible weapons cache. "Command wants a 2-team overwatch. You're on the list." "Who's leading?" She nodded once. "When do we roll?" 0400. The night before departure, she lay on her cot listening to the wind push against the tent. It had been restless lately, unpredictable, sharp. She traced the sound with her thoughts, wondering if her grandfather would still recognize her now. He used to tell her that wind had character. It can be cruel or kind, he'd said, but it never lies. She wasn't sure she believed that anymore. Out here, the wind carried too many voices, some you didn't want to hear. They moved before dawn. 2 Humvees cut across the valley, lights dimmed, tires whispering over gravel. Rode in the second one, her rifle balanced across her knees, eyes fixed on the fading starlight. Sat across from her, checking his scope for the 3rd time. "You ever notice," he said, "how quiet it gets before something goes wrong?" She looked at him. "It's not quiet," she said softly, "it's listening." He frowned but didn't answer. By the time they reached the southern ridge, the sun was bleeding into the horizon, that strange Afghan gold that makes even destruction look beautiful. They hiked the last mile on foot, setting up a hide overlooking a narrow wadi where Intel believed the cache was hidden. The plan was simple: observe, confirm, and call for extraction if needed. But plans have a way of unraveling quietly. Hours passed. The sun climbed, then sagged. Nothing moved except wind and time. Chewed on sunflower seeds, spitting shells into the dirt. "You think they're even down there?" "They're there," said. "How do you know?" "Because the valley feels different today." He laughed. "You and your feelings." She didn't respond. She learned to stop explaining things that couldn't be measured. Near dusk, movement flickered in her scope. Shadows along the wadi, 4 men, maybe 5, hauling crates from a cave mouth. She counted rifles, radios, the deliberate caution of people who knew they were being watched. "Got eyes," she whispered. Shifted beside her, glassed the same spot. "Copy that. I've got movement. What's your distance?" 863. Wind. 5 knots left, dropping to 3. Wait for the lull. They waited. The wind slowed, dust flattening against the rocks. "On your mark," he said. She didn't answer. She was watching one of the men, smaller, slower. A boy, maybe 16. The way he moved, hesitant, shoulders narrow under the weight of a crate. Muttered, "Hostile is hostile." Hesitated. Her finger hovered above the trigger. Her heartbeat counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then a flash, a glint off a rifle barrel as another man turned toward the ridge. "Contact," said, firing first. The shot cracked through the silence. One target dropped, the others scattered. Exhaled, found the glint again, and squeezed. Her round hit center mass. The man folded, dust exploding around him. 2 down, confirmed. 3 retreating south. She kept her eyes on the boy. He froze halfway up the slope, staring toward them though he couldn't possibly see. For a moment she thought he might run, but he didn't. He just stood there, arms limp at his sides. Trace said, "You got a shot." She didn't move. The wind had stopped again, that breathless stillness before everything changes. She lined up the reticle, centered the crosshairs just above his chest. Her finger brushed the trigger. And then she stopped. "No shot," she said quietly. Turned, incredulous. "What do you mean, no shot?" "Unarmed," she said. He cursed under his breath, lowering his scope. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He radioed in the contact report while watched the boy disappear into the haze. Her chest felt tight, like something had cracked but hadn't broken yet. Back at base, the debrief was brief. 2 confirmed kills, 1 probable, cache destroyed, mission accomplished. But victory didn't feel like anything. It just sat there, heavy and hollow. After the meeting, caught up with her outside. "You hesitated," he said. "I made a choice. You could compromise the mission." She looked at him, really looked at him. "Or I could killed a kid." He stared at her for a long time, then shook his head. "You can't afford to think like that out here." "Maybe that's exactly why we should," she said. He didn't answer. That night she couldn't sleep. The boy's face, that stillness, kept replaying. She tried to reason with herself. He might have been armed, he might have been a spotter, he might have been anything. But her instincts, the same ones that told her when the wind would shift, told her something else. He was just a boy carrying weight that wasn't his. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure what kind of soldier she wanted to be. The next morning she went to the range early. No one else was there. She set up a target at 1,000 yards, just a piece of metal glinting in the dawn. She aimed, fired, hit dead center. Again. 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 Each round landed exactly where she wanted it. Perfect shots, perfect control. And yet each impact felt wrong, like precision itself had turned hollow. She lowered the rifle, staring at the rising dust. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Shooting isn't about killing, it's about clarity. If you ever lose that, stop. She whispered to the wind, what if clarity's the problem? The valley didn't answer. It never did. Later that day, Captain called her in again. You did good work out there, he said. Command considering you for advanced recon training, possibly a leadership track. She nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. You don't sound excited. She forced a smile, just tired. He studied her for a moment. You ever think about what comes after this? After the missions, the deployments, the noise. What happens when it all stops? She hesitated. I don't think it ever does. He nodded like he understood, or maybe he didn't. Then he dismissed her. As she stepped out into the sunlight, the wind hit her face, sharp, sudden. She closed her eyes and listened. It wasn't cruel today, but it wasn't kind either. It was just there. That night the platoon gathered again. Not for cards this time, but for something quieter, a kind of unwritten ritual after every mission. They sat in a loose circle, trading small stories, memories of home. Sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. You ever miss it? He asked. Home. Yeah. Every day. He nodded, me too. Then after a pause, you were right, by the way, about that kid. Intel confirmed he wasn't on the list. Looked down, he'll be on someone's list now. Didn't know what to say, so he didn't. When she finally walked back to her tent, the wind had died completely. The air was still, the kind of still that pressed against your chest. She lay on her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, and thought about everything she'd done to prove she belonged. Every round fired, every moment spent silent while others doubted her. And for what? Belonging, she realized, wasn't about proving you could do what others did. It was about knowing who you were when the noise stopped. The silence felt heavier tonight, not empty, but full of questions. She turned her head toward the open flap of the tent. The stars above the valley were bright, cold, unblinking. Grandpa, she whispered, I hit every target, but it still doesn't feel like winning. The wind didn't answer. But somehow she felt it listening. The wind returned 3 nights later. It came without warning, sharp, cold, relentless. The kind that howled through the cracks in the plywood walls and carried the desert with it. Everything rattled, the tents, the tin canteens, the memories that never quite stayed buried. Lay awake, eyes open in the dark, counting the seconds between gusts. She wasn't thinking about the mission, or the boy, or the medal she still hadn't read the citation for. She was thinking about silence, how it never really left, only waited for the right kind of wind to carry it back. At 300, the alarm went off. Incoming fire. She rolled from her cot, boots hitting dirt before the second siren. The air outside was chaos, flashes in the distance, the dull percussion of mortars falling short of the wall, Marines shouting orders, scrambling for cover. She grabbed her rifle and ran toward the Overwatch tower, where was already setting up the spotting scope. They're using the wadi again, he yelled. Same pattern as last month. She dropped beside him, bracing the rifle against the sandbags. Through the scope, the night flared with movement, muzzle flashes blinking from the ridge. Range. 850, said. Wind. I've got it. She didn't wait for the rest. Her pulse slowed, the world shrinking to the tiny circle of glass in front of her. She tracked the arcs of fire, found the line of the ridge, then saw him, not a ghost, just another man in the wrong place at the wrong time, kneeling beside a mortar tube. She breathed once, and then the wind shifted. Hard left to right, violent. She could feel it whip through her hair, tug the barrel off balance. She waited, counted. The rhythm was wrong, too erratic, no pattern to read. Then another flash, closer this time. The ridge was crawling with silhouettes. Cursed, they're adjusting. We're gonna lose the south wall. Steadied the rifle, but she didn't fire. Not yet. The air was moving too fast. Her grandfather's voice came back to her. Don't fight it, listen to it. It'll tell you when. And then, like a heartbeat between gusts, she felt it, that impossible stillness. She pressed the trigger. The recoil rocked her shoulder. One breath later, the mortar fire stopped. The spotter's voice came through the radio. Impact confirmed. Position neutralized. Looked at her wide-eyed. You threaded that through crosswind. She nodded once. The wind hesitated. He laughed, not mocking this time, just amazed. You're not human, Trace. But she wasn't smiling. Because somewhere beyond that ridge, another silence had started. And she was tired of being the one who made it. By dawn, the attack was over. 3 wounded, none fatal. The base stood intact. The cost, as always, was invisible, measured in the quiet faces at breakfast, the way men stared at their coffee and not each other. Captain stopped by her tent that afternoon. Command, impressed, he said. They're sending a camera crew next week. Want to record a segment for training your wind-reading method. She shook her head, not interested. It could help others. Then write it down, she said. No cameras. He studied her a moment, then nodded. All right, off the record. He left the papers on her cot anyway. Her commendation, the after-action report, the formal recommendation for promotion. All the words that were supposed to mean something. She folded them once and slid them under her pillow. Some honors felt heavier than failure. That evening, she walked alone to the far edge of the ridge, the same place she'd taken her first shot on this base. The valley below was washed in orange light, soft and endless, the kind of view that could make a person forget where they were. She sat down, resting the rifle across her knees, and listened. For the first time in weeks, the wind was gentle, not angry, not wild, just steady. She spoke into it, barely above a whisper. You were right, Grandpa. The wind does talk. I just wish it didn't have so much to say. Days passed. The rhythms of war continued, patrols, briefings, reports, but something in her had shifted. The others noticed. She still shot, still trained, still led, but her eyes were quieter, her movements slower, as if each action carried a weight unseen. Approached her one morning during weapons check. You thinking about leaving? He asked. She looked up. Why? Because you've already gone somewhere else. She half smiled. Maybe I'm just tired. He nodded. Yeah, me too. There was no sentiment, no farewell. Just a shared silence between two people who'd seen too much and said too little. A week later, orders came down. The platoon was rotating out. Replacement unit inbound. Packed her gear in the same quiet way she'd unpacked it, deliberate, precise, as though every strap and buckle deserved respect. When she was done, she sat for a long time on her cot, hands resting on the rifle that had become more truth than tool. She remembered the first time she'd held one back in Montana with her grandfather beside her, the prairie stretching forever. It's not the gun that matters, he'd told her. It's what you choose to do with the moment it gives you. Back then she thought he meant shooting straight. Now she knew he meant something else entirely. The flight home was quiet. No one talked much. The hum of the aircraft filled every gap where words might have gone, stared at the floor, boots tapping a slow rhythm against the deck. When they landed, reporters waited behind the wire, cameras flashing, questions shouted, the noise of a world that had no idea what silence cost. She slipped past them without a word. Montana looked smaller when she returned. The ranch, what was left of it, sat where it always had, a small house, a rusted windmill, fields long since turned wild. The air smelled like grass and memory. She found her grandfather's old chair by the window, still creaking the same way it used to. Dust on the radio, the same song frozen mid-chorus. She set her rifle on the table, bolt open, empty chamber gleaming in the afternoon light. For a long time she didn't move, just sat there, listening to the wind push through the open door. It sounded like the valley again, restless, searching, alive. Weeks passed before she even realized she started teaching. First, it was a couple of local kids, sons of neighbors, curious about the Marine who'd come home. Then a few more. Soon there were half a dozen, learning how to hold steady, breathe right, respect the pull of the trigger. But wasn't teaching them to shoot, not really. She was teaching them to listen, to read the air, to wait, to understand that patience isn't weakness, it's power without noise. Sometimes she'd stand behind them, watching their shoulders rise and fall, and think how strange it was that something so violent could turn into something so peaceful when done with care. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a storm rolled across the plains. Wind whipped through the wheat, bending it in waves. She stood on the porch, eyes closed, letting it move across her face. She could feel the same rhythm she'd felt halfway across the world, the same breath of something ancient and indifferent. And for the first time in years, she didn't flinch. Because she understood it now. The wind wasn't there to test her. It was there to remind her. That stillness doesn't mean surrender. That silence can be strength. That you don't have to shout to be heard. A car pulled up at the gate, stepped out, older, tanned, a new scar along his jaw. He smiled, heard you were teaching wind lessons. She laughed softly, something like that. He looked past her at the kids in the distance. You ever miss it? Sometimes. And the rest of the time. She looked at the horizon, where the sky met the fields in a perfect, wordless line. The rest of the time, I'm still listening. They stood there for a while, no rank, no rifles, just two people who'd finally learned how to be quiet. The wind moved through the wheat, carrying the sound of something unspoken but understood. Smiled faintly and said, almost to herself, sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And